Hello and welcome to Merlin Reviews. It is time for another anime discussion. This request comes from the anime hero and Saiyan Z3. Who is the best DBZ villain? Frieza, Cell, or Majin Buu? Now, I know why these three were selected. In the second half of Dragon Ball, these are the three most powerful, most important, and popular of the villains. However, I must mention that this cannot be a definitive discussion without Vegeta or King Piccolo, or perhaps others. It can be argued that while Vegeta is an equally important villain, he transcends that through his development to become something different entirely. King Piccolo is left out simply because they asked for a DBZ villain specifically, though I could see his case for being considered the most important villain in the whole franchise. That being said, let's look at the three most popular villains. Frieza. It could be argued that Frieza is the most recognizable and important villain in the whole series. He is directly linked to the Saiyan race, and his influence very well could have led to Goku being sent to Earth in the first place due to the expansion of his empire. This also led to the Saiyans seeking out Goku and ushering in the era of Z, so to speak. Frieza also has the greatest presence in the series. The power gap between him and the other heroes on Namek never has the same dramatic impact with the other villains in later sagas. His legend is one which is built up from Raditz' arrival. Even so, his appearance is deceptive, appearing small and feminine, only to reveal a well of power within. Frieza is both a pirate and a galactic conqueror and sees himself as superior to other beings. He conquers planets and sells them for no other apparent reason other than he sees it as a fun pastime. He destroys entire civilizations with the wave of a finger, literally. He was also the archenemy of both Vegeta and Goku, and arguably Piccolo. In regards to Vegeta, Frieza forced him into servitude and twisted an already evil young man into something possibly worse. In addition to wiping out the Saiyan race, he humiliated Vegeta's pride by his sheer power. Vegeta's fear, desire for vengeance, and his own personal drive for power would become a major factor in many of Vegeta's early actions. He could also be considered an archenemy of Piccolo, as he threatened to wipe out the Namekians' homeworld, which he had only recently rediscovered. This interest in preserving his people was another major factor in Piccolo's development. Of course, with Goku, Frieza served to push the hero into the legend of Super Saiyan by killing Krillin. Ironically, Frieza's fear of the Saiyans and his own overconfidence led to his defeat by Goku. Frieza is the antithesis of Goku. Goku is caring and compassionate while fighting to defend others and to test his own limits. Frieza is ruthless and selfish, and lives to subjugate and destroy. It could be argued that though they don't really know each other initially, they are two forces of nature that inevitably must clash. In their battle, they truly grow to despise each other more and more by their actions alone. Frieza's impact on the series is undeniable. However, as of this video, Frieza doesn't really have much of an established backstory. His motivations are pretty basic. He's evil for evil's sake, and that's all we can really tell. Still, it could be argued that some villains don't really need a complicated backstory. We know enough about his established past to see who he is through his actions and his intimidating presence. He also does have some minor development. It is pretty basic, but he is a prideful being who eventually learns what true fear is, being undone by that which he wanted to destroy. Cell. The second major villain is Cell. Cell is actually very different from Frieza than one might assume at first glance. Though his arc has some similarities, their stories and characters are actually rather different. Cell has the most fleshed out backstory and motivations of any of the main villains, and, like Frieza, is deeply rooted in the series' history. Cell was created by Dr. Gero, one of the leaders of the terrorist group, the Red Ribbon Army. After the group was destroyed by Goku, Dr. Gero spent years studying Goku and his friends in an attempt to create androids to destroy them. Cell was the ultimate creation, being a biological creation fused from the cells of Earth's greatest warriors and their enemies. This gave him many of the powers and personality traits of some of the major characters. In this sense, he works as an arch-enemy for more characters than just Goku. He is rather a demented version of almost every major fighter in the series, giving everyone a greater motivation to stop him. Unlike Frieza, Cell is ironically a bit more defined. He wants to achieve his mission because he was programmed to, and his more evil and ambitious traits have been made more dominant. Granted, this isn't really much more complex than Frieza, but at least we have a clear motivation here. Really, it's the fact that Cell is aware of this and chooses to embrace it, almost having a strange existential perspective on it. Like Frieza, Cell is prideful, but only when he thinks he has reached his true power. His desire to absorb the androids actually involves him using more strategy, and even retreating from our heroes when he knows he cannot win. This makes him easily the most intelligent of the villains, and the most driven in attaining his goal. Unlike Frieza or Buu, we see Cell work for his power. Where Frieza was intimidating due to status and presence, Cell was more creepy, and eventually kind of campy. A frightening reminder of the past, Cell was a dark creation of a madman who was destroyed by the same pride that led to the deaths of another major villain, previously mentioned. Majin Buu. The final major villain is Buu. While he does follow the same basic formula as Frieza and Cell, Buu is a very different kind of villain. In many ways, Buu has the most interesting backstory. He is a powerful demon of destruction created by a dark wizard to wipe out the Kais, essentially the major deities of the Dragon Ball universe. When his power became too great to control, he was sealed away until he was to be revived many years later. Buu is kind of a combination of traits of previous villains, but with a more comedic twist. He has the legendary status of Frieza, and the evil creator with a grudge backstory like Cell. In terms of power, Buu really upped the ante by adding major shapeshifting abilities and other powers, along with near indestructibility, it seemed. It was as if he had Frieza's toughness and Cell's healing factor all rolled into one. Unlike the other two major villains, though, Buu was basically a blank slate. One thing that made Frieza and Cell memorable were very distinctive personalities. Buu gained this from other people, allowing us to see the darker side of some of the heroes in that sense. At his core, he has a childlike innocence, but also the same base animal rage that ironically makes him potentially more frightening. There is no chance of reasoning with him because he lives for pure and total destruction. However, due to his absorbing so many characters and the influence of his creation, we see that there could be some potential for some kind of redemption. Essentially, Buu never had a chance. Frieza was probably raised to be what he became and embraced it. Cell was designed for this purpose, but could have rejected it. Instead, he embraced his darker nature as well. Buu actually gets the rarity of not only being destroyed by the Spirit Bomb, but being reborn and given a second chance at life. This ends the series on a more positive note, circling back to the early themes and tone of the story. Now for the big question. Which one of these villains is the best? Well, I will try to be as unbiased about this and look at things from a story perspective. Cell has always been my favorite villain in the Z section, though King Piccolo may very well be my favorite overall. Buu has generally been my least favorite. Cell certainly wins in terms of backstory, and ties with Frieza in terms of connection to the heroes on a personal level. However, Frieza had a huge impact on the series, and that legendary status and massive power gap created more fear than Cell or Buu. The best thing Buu had going for him was a potentially interesting backstory, as well as the slight possibility of redemption that takes him a bit further than the other villains in terms of development, even if his character wasn't clearly established. Each villain does bring something unique with their arc, but Frieza is clearly the most important character in terms of impact on the plot, relations to the other characters, and his incredibly intimidating presence. The jump in epic battles clearly begins with Frieza as he completely shifts the mostly comedy fantasy series into a sci-fi epic. While it could be argued that Cell is a more complex character and that Buu is more threatening in some ways, in terms of his crucial importance, you simply couldn't have the series without him. Well, those are my thoughts on this big question. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Who do you believe is the best DBZ villain? Alright guys, it's been fun. Merlin out. Peace.